to the Gaming Discourse. I'm Tyler Frater alongside Richard A. the Cruz.
Proud sponsor of Monster Java.
And Chief Engineer, Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Hello.
It is Monday, August 21st, 2023. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on social media at Gaming Discourse.
All of social media.
All of the social medias. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse, Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse, where you can support us for $2, $4, $7, and $10. Get your name in the video credits, early access to videos, access to our Discord server, and more. We're going to have a bit of a weird show today because we have two topics that are about content creation and sort of journalism, kind of. We're going to talk. Linus Tech Tips is a YouTube channel that I'm sure you know what it is, and it's sort of gaming adjacent. They talk about games and gaming a lot, but
Yeah.
but sort of the wider niche that it's in is like hardware stuff.
Yeah.
And we're also going to talk about Patricia Hernandez reportedly being fired from Kotaku, and so those things will wrap, and we'll have a discussion about a lot of different stuff. But first, we have an exciting development on the Richard storefront story.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
It's a Richard
I'll look through it. I'll tell you what I give you. That's how this works.
store story.
So today was a bit on the slower side. Got some stuff done, so that was great. But about, I'd say around 2 o'clock, I had this older gentleman come in. Older, probably in his 60s, 70s, maybe.
Okay.
And he had a PlayStation Vita, beautiful condition. It's like he never played it. He had Uncharted. He had memory cards. He is complete in the box, everything. So he's like, "Oh, GameStop, send me over here. Like, how much would you give me?" And I was like, "Well, you got everything, so let me take care of this." And started talking about Uncharted. He's like, "Oh, I can't wait for them to make another one." It's like, "Oh yeah, no, it's a great series. Love for it to continue, et cetera, et cetera." So I finished with this trade. I give him however much it was. I think it was like $140 I gave him. And he's like, "Hey, where are your games? I'd like to check out, what you got." And I was like, "Oh, they're over here on the wall." He said he had a PS3, he had a PS4, he had a PS5. And I was like, "Cool, it plays a lot of games. Great." And he goes, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I'm looking for one." And he pulls out his phone. He's like, "I'm looking for Octopath Traveler 2. And I go, "Oh, yeah, I have a copy for PS5 right here." I go, that's a great game. And he's like, "You played it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I played it. I'm actually in the middle of it right now. It's a really good game." He's like, now what kind of game is it? It's like, is it a first-person shooter or is it like a role-playing game? I was like, "Oh, it's a JRPG. It's a Japanese role-playing game." And he goes, "Yeah." He's like, "Those they sure can make a good game, can't they?" And I go, yeah, no, they make great games." And he goes, "Yeah, Resident Evil 4. He's like, that one was great." And I was like, "Well, yep, it's great." and
Just your interest in this person just nosedived.
It's tough to keep the customer service facade going when you like kind of hit that like extremely outdated,
Yeah.
well, not even should never been used term for another ethnicity. And it's just like, okay, well, let me know when you need some help and I'll be over here. And I'm sitting there like, oh my God. And it's unacceptable, but I had to tell my coworker about it. And even my coworker was just like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Like, Jesus. And he bought the game. He was
Good
excited about it, but he bought it.
You stayed in the game.
You
made a sale. How dare you, sir? You take your PlayStation Portable back, sir.
But
Your
even
Vita?
so, I didn't. I already bought it at that point. But apparently, I didn't check him out because I was busy on a call with another customer. My coworker checked them out, and he said that I quoted him $40, and I was when my coworker was checking him out. The guy gives my coworker $40 and is like, "Yeah, I don't pay tax." That's what my coworker told me. And he totally seemed like the type of guy that if I was there, like I would have immediately shot back, "Oh, so you're not American. Like you're un-American," basically, because that would have like set him off, I bet. But it's just like, oh my God.
I don't pay tax.
Yeah, right. Like you just choose not to pay tax. Yeah.
Well,
anyways.
Okay, then. I regret that store story.
I'm
Usually
sorry.
It's something fun.
I told you.
Usually it's like a guy came in, he wanted $1,000 for Anthem, and I said no, and he said, "Go fuck yourself." That's usually the store story.
I still have stacks of that game in the back.
What do you know what, we can't, let's
Uses
talk,
them for coasters.
let's talk about what games we've been playing. You guys go
Don't look at me.
first. Connor hasn't been playing anything.
I got some stuff to talk about, I guess, to fill the time. I wanted to like kind of play something older because I get in those like big pendulum mood swings where I'm all about like new games, and then eventually I'll be like, oh, I want to play something nostalgic. So I looked on the classics, the PlayStation like classics area of the PlayStation Plus service, and I saw that they had at least the first 2 Twisted Metals on there, and I like Twisted Metal, so figured I'd give it a shot. And I played through the first game, and I had enough fun with it. If you Twisted Metal is the first battle royale game.
Yeah, I
bunch of cars and
played it when I was a kid. Yeah,
and it was good. It wrecked my thumb because the acceleration is forward on the D-pad. It's not like any other button. You have to hold forward to accelerate. So you're holding forward while pressing left and right, and it kind of wrecked my thumb. But I ended up beating the game. And I beat it several times with different characters because I found out you could just put in the cheat codes and it just takes you to the last. And it doesn't affect trophies. Some of them don't affect trophies. So I was like, oh, cool. Like, I'll just get some free trophies, whatever. And so with how rough that one was, you could tell that it was a game that was a really neat idea, but they had really weird design choices that I guess there was no standard for at the time.
Yeah.
So when if you're running around and you're low on health and you need health, there's this little platform with 4 posts on it, and electricity is just going towards the middle. You have to drive into that, and it like recharges your health, and then you keep driving. And then for weapons, there are little like bubbles, half circle bubbles coming up from the ground, and they'll have whatever weapons inside of it. But you're moving so fast, you can't exactly tell what you're getting until it's like too late. So it's rough while you're playing, having to cycle through while you're trying to watch the road to figure out what you have and what you don't. But I got past it, and like I said, I had fun with it. But I played the second game, and the jump from development experience is so great going from the first game to the second game. It's insane. There is an acceleration button on the second game. Weapons are now inside of little squares that are floating above the ground, so you can clearly see exactly what you're getting.
I love Mario Kart.
Right. Health packs are the same. You can clearly see what you're getting. Like, the levels are a little more thought out, where the levels in the first game were obviously you're in a circular room, like whatever. And then there's some where you go into neighborhoods and they actually become quite expansive, but they're a little too big for what you're doing in the game. So in the second one, they're a little more confined, but more thought out. So Twisted Metal 1 kind of feels like a game where they had an idea and they kind of just decided to go for it. What they put out was what they put out. Ended up getting popular. The second game was where they had enough time to really think out what they wanted to do or what they wanted the game to be. And so because of it, it's a lot more playable. Not that the first one wasn't playable, but it's absolutely rough.
I wonder how many games we played as kids that we didn't realize were massively broken in one way or the other because we were just young kids just doing stupid stuff and not really thinking about using the mechanics correctly to do something or playing the way the game is meant to be played or something like that. I wonder how many games people play my memory of Oblivion is just running around and doing whatever. I never actually finished. Like, I never actually went through the storyline in Oblivion. I just ran into. I did like Assassin's Guild, whatever they're called.
Yeah, Dark Brotherhood.
Brotherhood. I remember doing that and following. I had a guidebook that I followed. Funny enough, those old things, the Prima guides.
Oh yes.
But like, other than that, it was just a lot of going into random caves and fighting whatever was in there.
Kind of figuring it out.
Yeah. But
it's funny you mentioned that because I started replaying through the Mass Effect series, and I never really played just like the straight adept, just the biotics user, and I didn't realize how much that game becomes easy mode when you have magic powers in the future. One of the first boss fights, the Matriarch Benezia, completely nullifies anything she could do if you could just lift her.
Just lift her.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because then you just, she can't fight back. She's just ragdolling in the air, and your entire team just guns her down. And that happens so often. And I'm like, how is this not like, how did I not notice this when I was a kid? Because I just, I played some of the others, but I guess I just didn't want to play the Space Mage, but it's so broken.
Yeah, I don't remember. I was soldier all through my and I would love to go back to Mass Effect one day, but I still don't know if I can. I don't know if I can get to that ending personally.
Well,
it's been 10 years.
Okay.
It's been 87 years.
Mass Effect 3 is a good game. They just fumbled the ending.
Yeah, I know.
Up until the very end of Mass Effect 3, it is a good game.
You're right.
Play through it again.
I'll see. Maybe. Okay, so I have been playing a little bit more of Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 is very, very good. It's phenomenal. Not sure what else to share about it. I've been able to dig into it a little bit more. There are a few quality of life things that I hope they figure out a way around, or that I need to figure out a way around. One of the simple ones right now is when you open up your inventory, you can see your party's inventory. And say you want to add somebody else to your party. You can only have 4 people in a party, including your own character. So you have to dismiss somebody, stay at camp, and then you go to another person and say, hey, join my party. The person that you dismiss, they take the items that they have equipped and the items that are in their inventory, it stays with them, it's persistent. So that's a problem, because if you have 2 characters that are similar classes and you want them to use similar weapons, you have to unequip those things, carry them on your person, and then
equip them too.
And then equip them to the person that you say, hey, I need you to come with me. So that creates a lot of friction when you're at camp, lots of clicking and things like that. I don't think there's a way. I have Googled it a lot. It's I need to see everybody's inventory. I have not figured out how to do it. I don't think there is a way, but that's something that I hope this feels like something that should be possible. Maybe I can just pickpocket people. I don't know. But I'm afraid if I do that, they won't like me. Or maybe it's the right click inventory. I'll have to look. I've tried out a lot of things. I've Googled a lot of things. I haven't played it in a few days. But so I got through. There's a quest line that I think is, or a sequence of events that for me might be the single coolest. It's not really a quest line, but it's a sequence of. I'm just going to call it a quest line that I have ever played through in an RPG. I'm going to be as vague as possible here to stay away from spoilers.
All right.
There is an enemy base, okay? A big enemy base early on. This enemy base has tons of enemies in it. You have to be very careful. Now, these enemies are not automatically hostile to you. If you do certain things, you can walk into the base and they're neutral and you can walk through and they won't bother you. You can even ally yourself with these enemies if you want. Inside this enemy base, there are 3 mini bosses. Each of them are very tough. And there are a couple prisoners. And depending on how you want the story to shake out, you could either rescue those prisoners or you can torture those prisoners or kill them or whatever, right? So I'm playing, the problem with me is with the exception of a very few cases, everything I go through, I'm some boring, lawful good person. So I approach everything as a Starfleet officer. I could walk into a room and just, freaking Darth Vader would be there, holding a puppy at lightsaber point. And I'd just be like, can we just talk through this, Darth? Anyway. So, all right.
On a first name basis, huh?
Yes.
First title basis.
First title, Darth. So in this space, there's 3 mini bosses, there's 2 prisoners, and I'm playing it as a double agent. So I'm friendly-ish with these enemies, and I'm trying to figure out where another prisoner is somewhere in this compound. I haven't found them yet. So I go talk with one of the mini bosses, and I'm having a conversation with the mini boss, and I steer the conversation to, hey, where's this prisoner at? And they're like, oh, why do you want to know? And there's an option for deception that's like, oh, I'm going to go beat the shit out of him. And so I clicked that. I rolled high enough. I got it. So I'm playing it like straight spy. I'm like trying to figure out where everybody is. So as soon as I figured out where the prisoners were and I saw where the mini bosses were, I quietly killed a small group of the enemies to unlock a secret exit from this compound, freed a couple of the prisoners. Those prisoners went through the secret exit. And then I was like, okay, to rescue this third prisoner is going to have a more difficult time getting out. So the whole base is probably going to go on lockdown. So it's just going to be time to blow my cover. I go and rescue them. Turns out that these enemies, if you are in combat, the only enemies that will activate are within a certain proximity, right? So you can get into a battle and enemies at the other end of the base won't necessarily detect you unless an enemy hits an alarm. So I went through, I destroyed a few of these alarms. I forgot another part. The way to get to the prisoner, I had to go through underground caverns where there were spiders, and these spiders can enter the base. And so I met the spiders and I was like, this is going to be terrifying. My wife was watching me and I knew as I entered the spider cavern, I told her this is going to be like the opening to Saving Private Ryan. But I entered. Spiders are terrifying, but the spiders actually spoke with me, not through words, but they like communicated.
Yeah.
And I was able to communicate, hey, I'll break this door down and you can attack these enemies. And they're like, okay. So I was able to break the door down. The spiders took out a ton of the enemies in the base before they themselves were killed. So they took out a ton of enemies that I didn't have to deal with. Then the prisoner that I was helping escape joined me temporarily and became part of my party. So now I had taken out a huge swath of enemies in this base, released 2 prisoners. The third prisoner was on my team, and now it was like, okay, now it's time to assassinate these 3 mini bosses, right? So this is like straight double agent hitman stuff, right? Where I'm going through this, doing everything myself. I go through each mini boss and I come up with creative ways of killing them because they have minions with them. One mini boss is in an office by herself, and I found a break in the wall and I had my party jump through the hole in the wall. So my entire party jumped behind her. And so we got her just by herself, took her out easy. Another boss had a couple guards. We sneakily took out the couple guards, and then I fought her on her own and got rid of her. The last boss is like preaching and he's surrounded by a bunch of enemies. So there's no way to do it without these enemies seeing. Fireball. But because the other combat has not activated the entire base, they still think I'm friendly. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the good old Divinity 2 trick, which is also a Baldur's Gate 3 trick. There was a room I found that had a ton of fire wine barrels, which is just wine that you can detonate. Explosives and gunpowder barrels. So I took up my people. I picked up like 1,000 of these things. I went to where the enemy was preaching
and just started stacking them.
And just started throwing down all these barrels everywhere. And I'm friendly, so they're just like, oh, they just must be moving stuff around. They got orders from up top to do a cargo transport, whatever. So I'm just dropping these barrels everywhere. And it was perfect. There was like literally it had to have been 7 or 8, maybe 10 enemies plus the boss here. So I position all my guys and I'm like, okay, this is the final boss fight. I take one of my casters, I cast a simple fireball cantrip to one of the fire wine barrels, massive explosion, takes out all the bad guys except like 1 or 2, and the main boss had like 75 health, which is a lot. It was reduced to like 50%. So the fight became just way super easy by doing that. And then this was like inside a castle. As I exited the castle, the enemies on the outside were never alerted. So I just walked out of the castle, sneaking through it, assassinating 3 leaders in 3 different ways, freeing prisoners. And I walked out like, hey guys, what's going on? Yeah, it's been fun in there. Things are heating up, if you know what I mean. I just walked out with my party. So freaking cool. And the coolest thing is that my wife's playing through the game, and she's doing the enemy base a completely different way. She's doing it where it's like a raid, where you kicked in the door and it's just combat nonstop.
Put down the mimosas, bitch.
Exactly. Where the way I did it, it was like calculated and all these different assassination attempts and stuff like that.
That's why I love it.
It was very,
really
very
awesome. Yeah.
very cool. There was one moment where I was hiding my rogue, and there's these beams right beneath the roof, and I was hiding my rogue on these beams, and one of the enemies saw my rogue and ran up after them into the beams. So at one point in one of these fights, I had my rogue and an enemy facing each other on this beam, which is really high up there, so if you get knocked off it, you die. Luckily, I was able to win that fight. But yeah, so that's the kind of variability that makes Baldur's Gate 3 so special and so good. And it's not the only game in existence to offer stuff like that, but it executes it incredibly well. And it, like a lot of other games, I think emergent design is something that is going to become more and more popular. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, there's a lot of emergence there. Tears of the Kingdom is also a game I've gotten back into playing. It pairs good with Baldur's Gate 3, because Baldur's Gate 3, it's like, how do I do this 6 hours later? That's how I'm going to do it 6 hours later. Okay, I did it. Tears of the Kingdom, it's like, what's over here? What's over here? So it's a good, different pacing. But those are similar in that there's things you have to do, and there's a million ways to do them, just through being creative and being fun. Elden Ring was obviously emergent. You kind of just had to find your way. You followed a statue that was pointing. You know, an NPC was like, oh, the tears in the forest are curling. And you had to like, okay, what the fuck's that mean? You had to go to the forest or whatever. So, and then with Baldur's Gate 3, it's like, it's a story generator because there's all these different ways of figuring out how to get past obstacles or whatever. So I feel like, emergent design, which has been around for a long time, has seen an uptick in like the biggest games of the year in the past couple years that we haven't seen in a long time, which is cool. So yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 is very special. The characters continue to be really interesting. I don't really have... The combat continues to be really good. As characters level up, I have figured out how to use certain characters that previously I was like, okay, I don't really know how to use Will. He's the warlock. I was like, how do I do this? But as you level up and you unlock more abilities, you get a specialization, which allows you to unlock even further abilities. Each class also has like a special trait that's associated with them that gives them class specific abilities. So you tinker with those. And once you sort of learn all that, it becomes much, much more... instead of like me finding a team and like, okay, this is the team I'm going with and I might use the other ones, now I'm a little bit more, I'm going to experiment with this class this team composition, whatever. One spell that Will, the warlock, has is it's a whip. It's like magical whip that pulls them like 6 meters, which is good because it can pull somebody closer to him. Or, if you remember it, I was fighting an enemy and there was a crevasse between... And
you pulled him into the...
And I pulled a bad guy right into the crevasse and I was like, hell yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff like that in Baldur's Gate 3 as well, where there are spells that do a specific thing. You just have to keep that in the back of your head because you will run into that scenario. And if you use that spell in that scenario, it makes you feel like you're a fighter pilot that pulled off some brilliant maneuver or something like that. And all the classes have something like that. I have one class where, like, I have an ability. Well, this is pretty generic, but you know, one person has a goad ability, Lae'zel, which means an enemy will attack her. So she goads an enemy, and then my sorcerer and my cleric, Shadowheart, they both cast. It's a spell that ups your armor class by +2.
Mage armor? Oh no, shield.
Mage shield, something like that.
Shield.
But anyway, so it's like I'll goad somebody with Lae'zel, and then I'll up her armor class. Her armor class is already like 17, and then I'll up her armor class by like 4 more points, and basically nothing can hit her for the next few turns because her armor class is so high.
Sorry. Shield is for the self. You're thinking of Shield of Faith, which is
yes,
one
Shield
you
of
cast
Faith.
on other
And it's a cleric spell,
Yes.
which would make sense. But anyway, I'm learning all about Baldur's Gate now. Aren't you proud of me? Aren't you proud of me?
I was gonna say you're just enjoying a D&D campaign because I've started a new D&D campaign with my girlfriend, one of her coworkers, and some of their friends, and we're doing Curse of Strahd, so it's like a really classic vampire setting and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first enemies you encounter is a vampire spawn, so it's a fresh vampire. They're not like fully developed into becoming a vampire. They're kind of weak. And just through descriptions, the players had figured out some things. They'd picked up some like vampire hunting equipment that they had found along the way. And so in quick succession, they hit it with 2 holy water flasks and then staked it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And that's just, they could have, slogged and, just gone through the combat, but they're looking at what they had and they're like, ooh, we have monster hunting equipment. Let's hunt some monsters.
Right. Very nice. Okay. I think that's Tears of the Kingdom a little bit is getting better. My initial thing that I was like, okay, they give you all these abilities. Can you give me reasons to use them? They do that. I'm still not set on if I don't know. I'm having fun with it. I'll say this about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, that if you're a Nintendo fan, it's the greatest game of all time. Don't send us bomb threats. One thing that I think sort of sours my mood about the game is I never thought Breath of the Wild's combat was all that fun or good.
Yeah.
I agree.
And Tears is the same combat.
Yeah.
So, and it's fun when you're able to find creative ways around combat, like creative things to do instead of just, but I don't know. If Tears of the Kingdom had Elden Ring's combat, I think the game would be a bajillion% better. But it's like when I see a group of enemies, I'm not excited to fight them because it's just a lot of hopping around and waiting until they swing. And if I get hit, doesn't matter what kind of armor I have, I'm going to lose 18,000 hearts. So it's like, there I go eating a bunch of food. And I just don't think it's that great. And it could be like way, way better. But combat's never really been Nintendo's thing, I guess.
No, never.
Oh. Okay, are we ready to hit the ad?
Yep.
Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server.
With a drink in his hand?
Yeah, with Earl Grey. Okay, so we're getting into this Linus Tech Tips controversy, and we're not... we usually don't talk about this stuff, but I'm really passionate about content creation and the stuff we do here, and this isn't really gaming related, it's gaming adjacent. So there's 2 caveats, I guess. There's a shit ton going on. We're not going to get into every single thing. Gamers Nexus, which is another sort of tech review site that reviews PC parts and does so much technical reviewing that much of it is way beyond my understanding, released a video about Linus Tech Tips or Linus Group Media, their testing practices and business. In short, it's like a 40-minute video. There's a lot in there, a lot of examples, but in short, Linus Tech Tips releases tons of content very quickly with short deadlines. And this is largely self-imposed, and this hurts quality. Just a quote from the video: Linus Tech Tips is choosing to publish sometimes known bad or known incorrectly acquired data, and that's to meet these sort of self-imposed deadline. They mentioned that Linus Tech Tips is said to be worth around $100 million. Linus Tech Tips has like 15 million subscribers. Gamers Nexus has around, I want to say, 2 million subscribers. So Linus Tech Tips is a channel on the size of YouTube where it becomes larger than just a YouTube channel. It's like, it really is like its own weird, monstrous company of some sort. There was a specific story that was really strange about Linus Tech Tips testing a prototype. It was like a cooler. I forget exactly what it was.
It was a copper.
Yeah, it was a copper system. CPU cooler or GPU cooler. It
was a prototype that was given to him by a company that Linus Tech Tips eventually auctioned off when the company that lent it to them wanted it back. It seemed like there was a complete breakdown in communication because at first they were giving it to them, and then Linus Tech Tips, the review they made for it was a negative review. And so the company was like, well, if you don't want it, we'll take it back. A very weird situation that was just, a lot of this is just really bizarre. And then a few days after, YouTuber Madison Reeve, who was a social media coordinator at Linus Tech Tips, and this is going to get dark, spoke on Twitter about her experiences working at the channel. She was sexually harassed and belittled. She said the work took a severe toll on her mental health, and the massive pressure at the company to take no days off eventually led her, if I read this correctly, to cutting her own leg so bad she would have to go to the ER. It was in the middle of a text chain. I don't know. I don't think she was being like facetious. I think she meant that literally.
No, yeah, that's the thing.
It was like, holy shit. She said that was the only way she could, in her mind, she could take a day off without being harassed, because apparently there was this culture of like no days off, grind set mentality bullshit at the company. And it led to that, which I read. It was one of those things where I said out loud, what? Like no one else around me. Okay, back to the notes here. The next day, Linus Tech Tips posted a video, a sort of apology video about how things were going to change, but it was also kind of a defense of the company. This video was really bizarre. I guess we'll talk about it more in a little bit. And they didn't explicitly mention Madison Reeve in the apology video. So there was like, as with a lot of these issues, there was like 6,000 hours of YouTube videos to go through. The apology video was bizarre. I don't know if you guys were able to watch it.
I just read description of it.
It was, so I know that the channel has like inside jokes and stuff. The channel itself, or the apology video, was like lighthearted. Linus spoke last or next to last, which was weird. It opened with like their new CEO, went through a bunch of other people. Linus spoke last. Yeah, like I said, there one guy was joked he might be fired, and I know that's a recurring theme on the channel. This one guy always joking he's going to be fired or something like that. Still strange to see it in an apology video. They did this joke where like, brought to you by our sponsors. Just kidding. Like, apparently the video was monetized at one point, and then they had to demonetize it. Yeah, so all very strange and weird. Do we have any thoughts on anything? Do we have any thoughts on anything? You know, anything at all, including Baldur's Gate 3. Just kidding.
I know that they stated they were going to do what is always like, that is going to be done and bring in a third party to investigate
some of the workplace stuff. Yeah.
And, you know, with all the Activision stuff, the Ubisoft stuff, I'm kind of sick of hearing that, because it's an empty statement and promise, in my opinion, because we as the audience will never get to see what comes out of that generally. And if we do see anything that comes out of it, nothing substantial, or it's always kind of like the same canned response of like, we didn't find anything, or like who watches The Watchmen, you know? So it's one of those situations. So I'm pretty sick of hearing that. So when I did read that, like, oh, they were hiring third party, I did kind of like, oh, all right, well, you know, we won't, nothing will change, and it'll keep being the same. Yeah, unfortunately. But it sounds like a lot of this stuff is, well, like you said, self-imposed, brought on by themselves. Yeah. Probably due to the pressures of YouTube's culture in general, having to release something extremely frequently in order to be even seen on the channel, which is strange because you have 15 million followers. You would think that you're being followed. You don't really need to work that much harder, especially when it comes to tech. I do understand that things change very frequently in regards to the tech world. New GPUs, CPUs, motherboards, all that stuff can constantly flip-flop. So I do understand the need to frequently release stuff, but also having, like, if we were, I know we have, of course, Gaming Discourse, and then we have like them. But if like we decided to make 3 more like offshoots to focus on, that's spreading yourself so thin.
Yeah,
And,
we're already spread thin in some ways.
It's
There's just 3 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the rules of YouTube are weird because you'll hear people say, there's this video I really like by Big Joel. Sorry, Little Joel, his second channel.
What about Billy Joel?
Hey, Big Joel, right? Talking about, he compares YouTube's like Creator Academy, these videos that you could go watch and learn how to make YouTube. He compares it to an old Wendy's training video about how you serve a drink. Okay. And the thing is, like, Wendy's trained their employees to serve the drink this way because serving it this way was the best thing for the company. It's propaganda, right? It's not necessarily the best way to serve a drink, but it's the best way within the confines of Wendy's corporate structure and you know the money that they have invested into the cups and the soda and all that stuff. That's how to do it. So in the same light, the whole YouTube Creator Academy thing is, here's how to make videos, but the way that they explain it is, here's the best way to make videos for YouTube, the company, not necessarily for content or anything like that. And so it always kind of confuses me because people talk about how it doesn't seem like there are really, it's very capricious, and it doesn't seem like there are really any benefits to releasing stuff so often. ContraPoints releases a video once every 6 months. She gets 10 million views on a video every time. H-Bomber Guy is the same way. He takes 6 months to make a 6.5 hour video about Deus Ex, and he gets a gajillion viewers.
You're lucky if it's 2 videos in the year.
Dan Olson used to make shorter stuff. Now he makes like longer, almost
video
documentary video essays, and he makes something once every like 4 or 5 months, and he gets, so it's like, okay, so they're successful, and they're getting, so there's no rules here, is all I'm trying to say, is no one has the science down. And if you're in a position where you don't have to release a bunch of shit, then maybe you shouldn't, you know. And I don't know, if you're cutting corners and you're making mistakes, but you have to do that to sustain a certain level of like production or capital, then what you're doing is unsustainable and something has to give. And oftentimes you're just going to be making too much stuff and the quality is going to hurt. And that's the way that the internet, because that's what the internet rewards. The internet rewards a ton of shit that is disposable, that goes out, gets eaten up within a couple days of a game's release or something like that, and then is completely forgotten about, has zero cultural meaning whatsoever. And videos are like that too. And so with something like this, where it is such a huge systemic failure for such a big organization, Linus Tech Tips has something like around between like 120 to 150 employees in there, less than 200, but more than 100 there, somewhere in there. So it's a pretty big organization. That's a lot of people to pay.
It is a lot.
But you're creating this environment, and now you're there, so you're already in the problem. But you should have asked these questions before you went down that road of creating that environment in the first place, right? That's the same thing with like crunch. You may hear people say, "Well, we have to crunch on a game because that's how the scheduling works," or blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, but we should have planned things out from the beginning to not necessitate this back in the day, from the get-go. Yeah. So yeah, it may have to, within the context of where you are now, it may be required, but one, it doesn't mean you can't try and roll that back. But two, it's also a bad job on your part for building this context. And I think it's frustrating as somebody who operates a smaller channel, because it's like, I don't know what, when people complain about bad video games, for example, or we're going to talk about the Immortals 2 sequel in a bit, and why was it canceled? It was canceled because Ubisoft, instead of going through a creative vector, decided they were going to focus on bigger franchises, and that frustrates people because it's like, it's not because you can't make money, it's because you just can't make enough money. But you could sustain yourself doing it this way.
Yep.
And that infuriates everybody except Ubisoft executive management. So if you have a gaming channel, and that's something that bothers you, are you any better if you do that in your work? You know, and no, the answer is no, you're not. And that frustrates me as somebody who, I don't know, doesn't want 15 million subscribers, you know? Doesn't want fucking to rule the world, just wants to be sustainable, just wants to be able to do what I want to do. It frustrates me that people that get lucky enough to have huge platforms or whatever drive themselves to this point, and it feels so preventable. And that happens all over the internet, and it's just a reduction of quality, and it's just a reduction of I don't know, things people care about. So yeah, that was a ramble, but I don't know. It's something that I'm passionate about because YouTube is a horrible company, but some of the content released on there that I watch is profound, right? Like, if you have never heard of ContraPoints and you go watch one of her videos, they may give you a completely new outlook on the world. And it only exists because she was making videos in her house, and now she's super successful, and that's great. And that's sort of the platform. And, you know, YouTube is also not a platform, I think, that is meant for things like this, because it's not TV, it's not movies. So you've got this weird investment structure where it's based on ads and Google Analytics and an algorithm that nobody really knows how it works. So there's this, and it's all under the control of a monolithic company, as opposed to something like TV, which has regulation, which has multiple production companies and shit like that. YouTube is just one company, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this sort of large scale thing, I don't think ever was the idea for YouTube. Hence the name. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It was video hosting for the average man. I think YouTube was more for people like us that we just want to talk about games.
Yeah.
And if we get to 1 million subscribers one day, that'll be great. But don't expect us to put out shit every day. It's not going to happen, you know? And if that takes us back down to 50,000 subscribers, so fucking be it.
Twice a week, take it or leave it.
Yeah, so it's like this sort of thing never was supposed to exist, and it's here now, and no one really knows how to manage it. And the people that are managing them aren't managing these massive channels well. So I don't know, man. Yeah. And another thing I would like to hit on is there is a balance you have to strike in releasing something eventually. And that's a difficult conversation to have because it's like, you know, I've been working on this Splinter Cell video now for about a month. And so at some point, and if I worked on it, I could take a week-long break, come back to it, and work on it for another month, and it would be better. It would. Like, it would objectively be better. But you just have to... you have to release things, and you have to move on. Because if you don't, you just get stuck in this endless cycle of trying to polish the same thing over and over and over again. Yep. And it might get better. It might not. You may stagnate, whatever, but you have to move on and continue developing and continue building your skills and stuff like that. You have to build those steps. And... so that's a real balance. But if you go the other way, where you're constantly just putting stuff out there, then you're not building anything but I think bad habits and repetition. And that doesn't necessarily build skills. It just builds habits. So there is definitely a balance you have to strike in there somewhere. So I'm sure people out there can do weekly videos, maybe even daily videos, and they're good because they have found a way to do it. But if you're not doing it well, then stop, because the benefits I don't think outweigh the cons, I guess. But it is important to acknowledge that there is a balance between figuring out how much work to put in something and eventually just releasing it. Because you can work on something and it takes way too long and you stagnate and plateau and you don't get anywhere. That's a real as a real thing. Sorry, did you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about? I didn't want to hit on the Madison Reeve thing too much because there was a lot there. It was dark. We spoke about what she said.
Yeah, and not that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, because all of this is a culmination of everything.
Yeah.
But this all came about due to
the original Gamers Nexus video, which was a extremely good video. We'll talk about this other story here in a second. Sorry, go ahead and finish.
No, that was just the statement.
We'll move on because this next story is sort of wrapping a lot of the same thoughts to what we just talked about. So this is according to Shannon Lau, who was formerly at the Washington Post's Launcher, which was closed. She's now freelance writing at Substack. Geo Media reportedly fired Patricia Hernandez, who was Kotaku's editor-in-chief. This apparently followed a personnel disagreement. Hernandez told Lau, quote, "When leadership is, say, getting frustrated at you for writing about Tears of the Kingdom after it released, I do think there's a limit to how much things can flourish," end quote. What a way to put something, what an understatement. Mm-hmm. What a fucking understatement. Okay, so if you don't know what Geo Media is, just know that it sucks. It's ran by, Jared Vinnett types, right? And it's not about creating culture or figuring out how to write good content or driving discussion. It's not about any of that. It's just about greasing those wheels and getting things pumping out as fast as possible. They were, if you guys follow the Deadspin thing that happened a couple years ago, where a bunch of people left Deadspin and they formed Defector, which is a really good sports website. This was why, because there was a lot of friction between them and Geo Media, and maybe Go Media. I don't know. I've always pronounced it Geo. I've only ever read it. But that was them. That was Geo Media, who owns all the Kotaku, Deadspin, AV Club, whatever. Just recently, Deadspin ran a story that was written by a bot. So there you go. Or at least they were planning to. Not necessarily a new thing, but that's sort of the mentality that this company has. Sorry. Is there anything you guys would like to say on this?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And I don't know if I don't have enough familiarity to give my input on it, but there has been a noticeable, for me personally, decline in articles that are posted on Kotaku.
I think you're correct.
In the last year, after Totolo left, basically.
Yeah.
And not trying to point fingers. And I still go to Kotaku to this day, because they do still have articles that I do want to see, but there's more often than not really bad writing on that site, and I guess it seems like it might be more of Geo's thing than
it's hard.
Maybe Hernandez, but it is tough to say because there's no information on this. Is apparently all just hearsay.
Yes. So I think the state of games media is an interesting topic and one worth sort of really getting into, because games are the newest form of entertainment that humanity has invented.
Yes.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah.
And it's still not taken seriously.
And it's also the one that has grown up with sort of the internet. And so a lot of people involved with it are relatively younger, our age, which means the people in the media covering it are also relatively younger. So it's these two things that are developing at the same time, but games media is developing at a point when media in general is being devalued. And it's for the same reasons that we talked about with Linus Tech Tips, is you have, a similar reason, I guess. So much content is disposable. It's meant to sit on a shelf for a couple days, right? And then after that, it's useless. It has no bearing on culture or civilization whatsoever, because it's only meant to sit there for a brief moment in time. and then you have to move on to whatever is next. But what Patricia Hernandez said was writing about Tears of the Kingdom after it releases, that is covering games. That's driving discussion. That's figuring out, here's something that came out and here's we talk about it. Now, there is a place for that in the world. Every day, somebody makes a video about games that released 20 years ago and they talk about them. There are people that want to have that discussion, but the capital behind financing so much of this is not interested in discussion. They're interested in traffic and ad money and SEO and bullshit like that. Capital cannot exist concurrently with complex art or complex discussions that push culture, because capital is a black hole and it has one purpose, and it's just to absorb things, just to endlessly absorb things, right? That's its only point of existence, and that's the only thing it can do. I think you have CEOs like Strauss Zelnick who will tell you, well, we got to give our creatives blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the fucking day, if Strauss Zelnick has 2 buttons in front of him and it's make $1 billion more on, I don't know, GTA 5 online, or have GTA 6 be a cultural touchstone, but it makes you $500,000 or $500 million, he'll press the microtransaction button in a heartbeat. So those are the people that control the industry, and that's bad. And those are also the people that control such a huge swath of games media. And now you have games media entering this arena that is weird, because so much of it is behind paywalls. Jason Schreier stuff is behind paywalls. Shannon Lau stuff is behind paywalls. Launcher shut down, and I don't think it was because Washington Post just couldn't finance it, or else they had to shut down Launcher and not keep the lights on anymore. I don't necessarily think that was the reason it went down. It's because journalism and these kind of things aren't usually profit centers, massive profit centers, right? So you have to figure out a way to cover things and sustain yourself. And so people go to Patreon, or people go to Substack or whatever. People go to YouTube. Some of the best journalism that's been done in recent years is by people make games, right? Some of the best damn journalism in games media. But the problem is that's on YouTube, so it comes with all the problems that YouTube has. It comes with if you say a cuss word or something, you may be threatened with demonetization. So it comes with all those issues, right? It comes with DMCA problems, and it comes with the problem that they're a small group of people. They don't have lawyers on retainer like the New York Times does, or I assume the New York Times does, or something like that. Or if you publish something that's going to piss somebody off, you have the strength of an institution behind you. You don't on YouTube. You don't. And it's the same thing with Substack, and it's the same thing with Patreon. So that's another problem, is how much of it is going behind paywalls. And if you believe in games as an art form, and if you're passionate about them, this should worry you a little bit, because if everything just turns into disposable content, top 10 things to do in game the week the game comes out, and then that piece of content is gone. And you're not going to be pushing discussion, you're not going to be pushing culture at all, then I don't think the industry is going to get any better for it. And I also don't think games are going to get any better for it, because part of games is talking about them, so, and preserving them and stuff like that.
And that in itself is its own problem, because the preservation aspect of it is so hard to do for these companies. And you bring up the point of, or this ties into what Patricia Hernandez says about having to discuss more about Tears of the Kingdom after it releases. I run into very frequently posts online that are like, how come nobody talks about this X game from 20 years ago? And it's like, well, because we moved past that. Like, it's not around anymore. If it was around, it's different with movies. Like, people keep talking about like Casablanca, It's Wonderful Life, Wizard of Oz, because you can still easily go find those movies and experience them. But with games, it's not as hard, or not as easy.
Yeah.
But if it was easy, I think that people would be more open to speaking about it well after the game has been.
Yeah. The nature of the medium, I think, definitely makes things a little bit trickier. Yeah. And also, No, yeah, I think you're correct. I didn't know where I was going to go with that, and also it was just a random and also.
I don't know where I'm going at all.
But I guess these two things are somewhat related, because it's about how do we create an ecosystem that is sustainable, but that also produces meaningful work, and that doesn't always equate to tons of money. Mm-hmm. But the people that want to get into it from a financial standpoint, that's all they want. And those two things are incompatible. Mm-hmm. And if everybody has a thing that they hate if it gets ruined by people with money. So, if you're a fan of sports and you're like, whatever, load games with microtransactions, who cares? It's what players want. You just make all the stupid arguments. Don't complain then if your team gets bought by an owner who uses it as a toy and doesn't invest money into paying for players and shit like that, and you become the fucking Pittsburgh Pirates or something like that. Right?
Oh, wow.
Right?
I forgot that was a team
you forgot existed, which was good at one point and it's had some decent years in the past. But don't complain if that happens, because it's the same concept. The Dallas Cowboys have made a ton of money over the past 30 years. They've also been a pile of shit. So which one do you want? Sorry, I had to be obscene there. Okay, anyway, let's move on. Axios is reporting a little more details on the canceled Immortals sequels. So some background. Video Game 24/7 reported a few weeks ago that Ubisoft canceled the Immortals sequels in favor of focusing on established franchises. Stephen Totillo is now reporting on the new details. The Immortals sequel, codenamed Oxygen, was going to be a Polynesian action-adventure inspired by Wind Waker and Elden Ring. Sounds cool. The first Immortals was developed in a little more than a year, while Immortals 2 was taking longer due to its scope, revisions to the underlying Assassin's Creed engine, and a team kept small as Ubisoft focused resources on Assassin's Creed Red, which I believe is an Assassin's Creed planned on being set in
Japan.
Yeah.
Which is not for another 2 years?
I'm not sure. Part of the plan was for Immortals 2 to drop hallmark Ubisoft design choices like quest markers and compasses/arrows that point to the players to the next objective. Immortals 2 wanted players to search harder to figure out where to go, including by tracking animals or following the wind. But concerns over cost led to the game's cancellation. That's too damn bad. Real quick, again,
Ubisoft is a bunch of cowards.
Ubisoft is a bunch of cowards, both in that their CEO still hasn't apologized for anything that ever happened, and was apparently also a victim himself. And also, were those costs unreasonable? We'll never know. In the minds of the people that make money, yes, because spending a cent where you don't need it is an unreasonable cost that's going to blow up the world or something. But also, I think what's interesting is Ubisoft has the reputation of being stubborn with their design, right? Where it's every game's going to have a bajillion quest markers everywhere. Immortals was kind of like that, not just quest markers, but markers for things to do. But now again, with the emergence, the re-emergence or repopularization of emergent design, we're seeing games where it's go find this ring. Where is it at? It's in this half of the map.
Yeah.
It's oh, okay, right? We're seeing tons of design like that, and the most important thing is that type of design is selling, and it's winning awards. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, right? Big, multi-path, complex, emergent designs are popular, and there's a market for them. So I don't want to hear excuses about we can't develop this game this way because nobody's going to play it, nobody's going to buy it, because it's just not true.
Gamers don't want single-player cowboy games. All right, this is an objective fact.
Thank you,
Objective fact. They make so much money. I mean, I don't know how much money they make off Rainbow Six Siege. They make enough that they can release packs all the damn time. And also the same with For Honor. For Honor is still going, quote unquote, very strong. And it's unfortunate to see because Immortals, you guys have heard me talk about it. I feel was an excellent game, although it still had a lot of the same facets that other Ubisoft games had.
Yeah.
I think the biggest strength is the care that was brought forth regarding the references to Greek mythology and the usage of those characters as well. They released a DLC the final story DLC that focused on East Asian cultures.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, there was
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and I never got to that one. It'd be nice. But not only is it a shame that they're not making a game that sounds like would have not just expanded, but just kind of like changed, could have sparked the change that Ubisoft needs as far as their open world games goes. But now we no longer have a representation for like Polynesian culture, which is arguably like some of the more interesting and untouched on parts.
There are a lot of parts of the world that are...
Well, yes, of course. But, you know, I feel like if there was any sort of culture to like explode next in popularity, it should be that, because we even have Disney, like Lilo and Stitch and Moana, that are great films that expand upon that. So it really would have been nice. And I think that Following the Wind is something that Ghost of Tsushima does and does very well. But I think the next best thing, if you weren't to follow the wind, would be to follow the animals, or at least hunt animals.
It would be cool.
And I think that would have been very cool as well. So this is very disappointing to hear, but it is what it is, and we don't make the decisions. What sucks is that even more is that if Immortals being shut down, they can't just take those ideas and go to somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just, nope, it's ours.
Yeah, that game being canceled is now just gone forever. But I mean, there's a possibility that but I guess maybe the good news in a way is that this is the first time I develop a AAA developer in my mind. Well, there's probably been a couple times. The first time I know of or remember where a AAA developer has explicitly said, Elden Ring is how we want to do things. And that's great, because Elden Ring's open world was really interesting and cool. Okay, let's hit that. What if I told you, in this world, there are bits, and there are tids, and Richard is the only man who can put them together into tidbits.
I didn't discuss this beforehand, but no, I didn't have tidbits ready because I couldn't really find any. I mean, I know there's lots of stories out there, but I couldn't find anything that I really was interested in talking about. But today they did announce the retirement of Charles Martinet from the voice of Mario and Luigi and Wario. Is that how you
pronounce his name?
Charles Martinet, yeah.
Really?
He's French. Yeah, he's part French.
Oh, man, I always thought it was Manet.
French man playing an Italian.
Charles, I thought
in
it was
a Japanese game.
I always thought it was Charles Manet.
I could be wrong, too. I always hear it being said Martinet.
Charles Manet. There, that's French.
But yeah, he is retiring. He's over 70 now. So somebody else will be voicing Mario in the newest Mario game. And Nintendo is being very Nintendo. They're people are asking, hey, who's gonna voice Mario? And they're like, there's credits in the game. Just gotta wait and see. Like, they literally told people that. So it's we don't know who's gonna be voicing Mario now.
Quick. Who are the worst people that could voice Mario?
Nintendo.
Steve Buscemi, I think, would do a horrible job as Mario. I think
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That'd be a bad one. Matt Berry would be pretty funny. That actually may be a good casting.
That's a great casting.
It's me, Mario.
It's me, Mario.
If you're approaching it that way, Christopher Walken would make a great
Walken. Oh man. Okay, let's all do a Christopher Walken impersonation before we close out.
No.
Luigi, don't walk away from Mia. That's my.
Because I always did this growing up because I fucking love Joe Dirt. Talking to my guy all wrong. It's the wrong tone. You do it again. Stab me in the face with a soldering iron.
What about us with what does he say in that movie? Shit! I just had it in my head. When you can't eat dairy.
Lactose.
One of those that are lactose intolerant. Envy is the movie. Envy. With Jack Black.
With Jack Black and Ben Stiller, I think.
Like yeah. Okay, follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse. Patreon.com/Gaming Discourse. A new episode of Gaming Discourse FM this week.
Yes, this week, yes.
And we will see you next week.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thanks, Monster.